Just gut reactions, you just sat through the show again. What is it like for you? I mean, it's different for you watching it than for me.
It's so humbling to see this many people gathering around these songs that were made without this intention. You know, there was no aspiration. It was made from a place of blind love, and then to see all these people working so hard around these songs and around this story and building the story around these songs, it's very humbling.
I realized 20 years, actually, the anniversary is coming up of this album that inspired this musical. Can you remember sort of like what about this story resonated?
I mean, absolutely. Seth and I come from a long line of adventure stories, at sea, disaster stories. Our father, he passed down a love for this type of nonfiction.
He imprinted a bit of horror and a bit of I think for him it comes from a place of interest in heroism and survival.
Yep.
So he has passed on a lot of war stories and a lot of, you know, lost at sea stories, shark stories, all these like just horrendous experiences for people that came through them. You know.
That we try to shield our children from to no avail.
Right.
But so there
it's
was
so fascinating.
It is fascinating.
You know, you're just drawn in.
But there was a book called The Custom of the Sea, and it was this story. And for us, we were driving around to places that were seemed unknown in a van. We seemed to have nothing but this belief that we were doing something that was true, like young people do, to go and be as true as they can, and they mean that, and that's a good thing. But we were in that, living it, and it was easy to see that van as our vessel. And while we were making records in that time, that record in particular, it was easy just to see that concept as a part of our story.
We took ourselves quite seriously, you know. I think that it all just seems so pressing and like just such a great living analogy. Like we were in our little lifeboat, separated, you know, like we were seeing our peers succeed, and we were seeing ourselves sort of extricating ourselves from the common template, you know, and the common sort of tunnel of experience. And it was scary, and we felt very driven to survive.
So what is it like when you get an email or a phone call that somebody wants to make a musical out of this beloved album, but, you know, years in your past, right? What was the reaction to this?
I mean, I don't remember anything except for intrigue and excitement. It was just done so, I guess for lack of a better word, properly, meaning like care and inspiration came with the introduction of the concept. You know, it wasn't like, hey, what if we did this? There was no flippancy in it. You know, it was like, it came with a great deal of sincerity,
right,
and love for the work, and also a commitment right out of the gate that we could be involved, and that we could be, you know, that we could be gatekeepers in a way, that as it grew and progressed, it wouldn't be something where some eventual presentation of this music was not in accordance with our desire. You know, John, you know, right out of the gate, he came and met with Scott and I, and was like, he had this book, and like he had already like gone so far. You know, he had already had like a genuine inspiration, and it was a beautiful thing to see, and it was motivating for us too.
Yeah.
You know, like it wasn't like he wasn't just playing off of a thing, that there was genuine new inspiration happening, and that's intoxicating for an artist, you know, like, regardless of where it came from or how it started. All that's a mystery anyway, you know.
Right.
But it felt like a new thing right out of the gate, which was super exciting.
What do you think of musicals?
Well, I'm a big fan of jazz, and the time I met Scott and Seth, I was studying jazz. Went back to school to study jazz guitar, jazz bass, and those songs all come from the Great American Songbook. I mean,
Sure.
all the jazz songs are show tunes. And as far as the Broadway and that world, I know nothing about that world. But the idea of having the songs released from us and given to the world in that way, you know, it's extremely exciting. It feels like, you know, as we move through our lives and, you know, eventually pass on ourselves, the songs perhaps can keep living in different forms in different places. And if we can bring our fans to the theater, you know, and then you bring the theater folks to our shows or to our music, it is this like cross-pollination that can just be beneficial.
Nothing short of thankful, nothing gonna change my mind. I'm walking a different highway, no, nothing gonna change my mind.
What about hearing these guys, these talented guys on stage singing your music? I know John Gallagher is like a super fan. He had your poster up backstage on Broadway. I mean, you know, you were backstage on Broadway already years ago for John Gallagher. What is it like seeing these performers take on this music and these roles and this story?
Musical theater only exists because it does a certain thing that nothing else does. You know, it's like any art form. It's why the Elizabethan sonnet exists, or why jazz exists, or why, you know, bluegrass exists, or abstract expressionism, or anything. Like it only exists because it had to, because no other thing would express it like it does, you know. So seeing these guys do this, it's this once in a lifetime, once in many lifetimes possibly, opportunity to see this music that you wrote and that you've presented possibly thousands of times turned into an expression that you never thought possible, you know. And these four guys and the entire cast are remarkably equipped to do that.